Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel. And this week we are talking about masculinity, what it is, and why the new definition of it is a disaster. GQ is one of the leading publications for men, particularly in matters of fashion and culture. If you have a question about style or about the environment that we currently live in and you're a guy, then no matter where you are in the world, GQ is the place that you go to. And last month in October, GQ actually did something really philosophical. They sat down and said, hey, we're a publication for men, but what actually is manliness? What is masculinity? That had a lot of potential to be really interesting and really enlightening, particularly in our day and age. But as soon as the question was asked, problems immediately raised their ugly heads.
I'm shocked.
And so many of these problems were encapsulated in the feature entitled Voices of the New Masculinity, which sought to explain, quote, how masculinity is morphing and modernizing according to 18 influential people who are shaping our culture now. Okay, I'll bite. How exactly is masculinity being modernized in the 21st century? Jabuki Young White, who is a young male gay comedian, and I make those qualifications specifically, you're going to see why here in just a moment, he said this, quote, even though I was around a lot of people who were homophobic or exhibiting these toxic mannerisms, there was also this high level of chivalry, where if a woman walked into the barber shop, you would make sure she had a seat. Or if someone differently abled walked in, you would make sure they had a seat. There is a code of ethics that I think is noble and good, and doesn't need to only be practiced by men. There are aspects of masculinity that we all exhibit. Thomas Page McGee, whose bio describes her, yes, her, as the quote-unquote first transgender man known to box at Madison Square Garden, described masculinity like this, quote, I figured out how to be the man I am mostly by doing the exact opposite of what's expected of me. I listen more, I talk less, and I hug other men, even my uncle. And I think about that day when I first opened my mouth and realized how disturbingly powerful I suddenly was, simply for existing in this white man's body. Asia Kate Dillon, who is a gender non-conforming actress, answered the question this way, quote, traditionally, masculinity and femininity have been seen as binary polar opposites. What I was excited to discover for myself, and what I'm excited to see happening in the larger cultural context, is a redefinition of masculinity and femininity as things that are all-encompassing, that masculinity can be hard or soft, strong or vulnerable, and that those things aren't opposites of each other, because being vulnerable is a sign of strength. I'm excited to see people deciding for themselves what masculinity and femininity mean to them. For one person, masculinity might mean a dress and a face of makeup because that's how they see themselves. Now, you might have noticed something here, gang. The first 3 of the 18 voices that GQ got to talk about masculinity are a young black gay comedian, a transgender man, meaning that she's actually a woman who presents herself as a man, and a gender non-conforming actress. And this trend actually continues throughout the feature. Other voices that GQ got, just to name a few, are Tarana Burke, who is the founder of the Me Too movement. Al Freeman, who is a soft sculpture artist who is playing with the tropes of toxicity. Liz Plank, who is one of the most visible feminists in the digital age today. John Waters, the transgender filmmaker and the self-proclaimed Pope of Trash. Blair Braverman, a female dog sledder, Anna Gadsby, who is a lesbian comic talking about toxic masculinity, and E.G. Johnson, son of Magic Johnson, who has decided to embrace traditional feminine clothing and cosmetics so that he can be a successful person by bonding and embracing his quote-unquote feminine energy. That's 10 of the 18 voices right there, meaning that there were actually very few masculine voices talking about what masculinity means in the 21st century. People who, for the most part, have no clue what masculinity is are the ones now preaching what it should look like. I can hear protesters already saying, well, you don't need to be a man to have an idea of what masculinity is supposed to be about. And since women and minorities have traditionally been hurt by men, they're in a perfect position to actually know and better understand what a new masculinity should look like. Now, it's true. You can have an idea of masculinity without necessarily being a man. just like you can have an idea of femininity without being a woman. But if you're proposing a new vision of masculinity or femininity, a new vision that is completely cut off from culture, from history, and from imagination, then really that new vision has to be left to the people who actually embody those characteristics within themselves. First, because they're the people who must live with masculinity or femininity within their very bodies, they are much better able to know the strengths and the weaknesses of those essences, which means that they're going to be able to say what's wrong with the old vision, why the old has to give away to the new, and how the new is going to be an improvement on the old vision. Secondly, and building up from the first one, because men, in this case, are the ones who are going to have to live with this new vision and version of masculinity, they're really the ones who should be crafting it. And there's another problem here as well. One of the running themes throughout this feature is that the essence of masculinity, its form, is actually formlessness. Young White says that there are aspects of masculinity that everyone exhibits. McGee says that she does the exact opposite of what's expected to her as she presents herself as a man. Dillon just up and out says that she's excited to see people finally deciding for themselves what masculinity and femininity mean to them, i.e., it's completely relative and subjective. But this leads to a huge problem, because if masculinity is completely subjective, then the campaign to make masculinity more friendly and better towards women, like Burke, Freeman, and Gatsby claim that they're doing, that campaign falls flat on its face. All three women say that they want to eradicate toxic masculinity, but if masculinity only means whatever an individual man, or would it be what every individual who identifies as a man? Or would it be what every individual who presents himself as a man? Or would it be how every individual who presents itself as a man wants it to mean? How are you actually going to eradicate toxic masculinity? If it's completely subjective, like Dillon says, then if a guy decides that for him, masculinity means berating his girlfriend, cheating on her, and being a deadbeat, what principle can you actually use to argue that no, that's not real masculinity, that's bad? And this new Voices of Masculinity isn't just the only feature that GQ published to push this new idea of masculinity. They printed an entire issue about the new masculinity. Now, because no one wants this video to be 2 hours long, we're not going to get into every feature of that particular issue, but just based on this one feature that we were talking about, we can be pretty confident in saying that GQ is talking through its hat when it is pushing this new vision and version of masculinity onto its readers. But that still leaves us with the overhanging question: what is the essence of masculinity? What is its form? What does it look like? And in a word, masculinity, authentic masculinity, comes down to strength. Let's get something out in the open right now. Men are just physically stronger and more powerful than women. And I will go on record in this video today and say that I am not sorry if that offends anyone listening, because that is the cold, harsh reality that has been decreed by nature from the very beginning. And it is an act of nature. A man's natural strength comes from the testosterone that courses through his body. Testosterone increases muscle mass as well as bone density, meaning that testosterone is the element that makes men naturally stronger, more powerful, and faster than women. And I know a female Olympian could kick my tail from this chair I'm sitting in into the next county without breaking a sweat. But here's the thing about that. She could do that because she's actually trained in a discipline that I'm not. Put a man and a woman trained in the same discipline in opposition to each other, and the results are going to be very different. This is why back in 2017, FC Dallas, an under-15 boys soccer squad, beat the U.S. national women's soccer team in a scrimmage. But having that natural strength is less important than what you actually decide to do with that strength. You can have strength and abuse it, just like you can have power and abuse it. So the real question is, towards what end? So the real question So the real question is, towards what end, towards what goal should a man channel his natural strength so that he can be a real man, an authentic man, and not actually partake in toxic masculinity? And the root, fundamental answer to that question is this. A man should channel his strength so that he protects and defends all those who are weaker than he is. This includes women, children, the disabled, anyone who is naturally weaker and whom could be taken advantage of falls under the responsibility of an actual and real man. Okay, you might be thinking, how does the one naturally follow from the other? How does being strong mean that you have to protect the weak? Well, it follows like this. We know that every human being, regardless of age, sex, nationality, ability, is a human person, meaning that that person is endowed with natural rights and corresponding duties, and that their human nature, which is expressed primarily through their rationality, gives them intrinsic human dignity and worth, which has to be respected. Anything that disrespects their human personhood, whether that's stealing their property, lying to get some sort of advantage from them, exploiting them, murdering them, is a crime against them, and it's a crime against human nature. And the thing is, we intrinsically know this. In ancient Egypt, in the funerary text we know as the Book of the Dead, the deceased was given a list of 42 sins that he was supposed to proclaim in front of the court of the gods that he had not committed while he was alive and kicking on earth. Some of these sins included, I have not stolen, I have not slandered, I have caused no one to weep unnecessarily, I have terrorized no one. To give another example, fast forward to Europe of the Middle Ages. According to encyclopedia.com, a candidate for knighthood swore an oath to the code of chivalry in which he promised to defend, quote, the weak, the poor, widows, orphans, and the oppressed. He was to be courteous, especially to women, brave, loyal to his leaders, and concerned about the welfare of his subordinates or those of lesser rank and position, unquote. However, from history and just from reading the news every day, we know that what should happen is not always what actually does happen. We know that the weak are very often exploited, their natural rights are trampled, their ability to fulfill their natural duties is oppressed, their human dignity is attacked. And in every single one of these cases, their personhood and their human nature is attacked, and in some cases, like in murder, it is completely scrubbed away altogether. All of this means that there have to be protectors, and of course protection falls upon those who can actually protect. People who are stronger than the people who require protection. To quote the late great Stan Lee, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, from this basic formula, we can actually move forward and include other things through a series of deductions about what masculinity has to have in order to be authentic. Most obviously, it means that a man is going to be physically strong in order so that he can actually physically protect the weak and the vulnerable. Physical strength, though, is only one small part of the equation. Masculine men are also going to embody virtue, things like courage, justice, selflessness, and honor. All the strength in the world isn't going to mean a damn if you don't have courage to face danger when you're actually required to protect the weak and the vulnerable. You need justice so that you know right from wrong, and so that you don't slip into toxic masculinity. You need selflessness so that you are willing to give yourself up for others, even if that means sacrificing of yourself substantially for those who are weak, for those who are vulnerable, and for the greater good in general. And honor to hold yourself accountable and to be true to your calling to channel your strength to serve the common and the greater good. It's absolutely no coincidence that our word virtue comes from the Latin word vir, which means man. The word itself symbolizes strength. This means, too, that a masculine man will have a hard streak in them. He will have flint in his soul. Vulnerable men aren't going to be able to stand up to the storms that are raised by the world and the evil men within it when their ambitions and their desires are thwarted. A vulnerability is just another word for a weakness, and weakness gives in because there's nothing inside of it to support it. It's an empty balloon, an empty barrel. Evil isn't like some 1940s serial villain all bluster and twirling mustaches. It will devour you unless you have the iron in your soul necessary to withstand its poundings as well as its fire. And no, to lay rest to the old cliche, this doesn't mean that a strong man cannot express what he is feeling, what he is thinking to, for example, his wife or to his significant other. That in and of itself is a sign of strength, to be brutally honest with the person who means more to you than anything else in the world. It also means that masculine men are going to be stoic. They are going to do what is right. They are going to protect the weak and the vulnerable, whether they're recognized for their heroics or not, whether they're praised or not, whether they are rewarded or not, whether they even succeed or not. Because the masculine man, the stoic man, understands that what matters isn't glory, it isn't praise, it isn't even a successful conclusion necessarily. It's doing the right thing for the right reason. In fact, one of my favorite examples of this principle actually comes from the very first Hobbit movie.
You what? I said, drop him.
And there it is, in a nutshell, attacking an enemy stronger than you to protect someone weaker than yourself, regardless of the cost. So there we have it, the real essence of masculinity and how it is going to be expressed in real men. So what say you? Is this an accurate and good description of masculinity? Have I left anything out? Have I included something that should be discarded? As always, let me know your thoughts, your ideas, and opinions in the comment box below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by giving it a like, sharing it with your friends on social media, and leaving a comment down below. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, and religion, but from a different POV, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to ring the bell for notifications so you will always know when I post new videos like this every Tuesday. Videos you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your day. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. And I will see you all again here next week, gang, on Top of the Stone. Ciao.